Welcome to Scary Stories. Tonight we've got another one of those stories that the author who emailed it in claims is true, but it's not something he or she can prove. Of course, that describes like 99.9% of the dogman or cryptid narratives that people send in to us. But the reason I'm pointing it out this time is that the villain in this one is sort of basically the establishment. See, when the bad guy is a monster or a former spouse, that's fine, but when it's rich people or the government, suddenly sometimes there can be a problem. It's not that the powerful are thin-skinned and shallow narcissists who can't stand to have their flaws pointed out and mocked, it's just that, well, actually that's exactly what it is. So in order not to hurt the feelings of any power-mad infantile authority figures or stands thereof, I would like to state that I am presenting the following narrative for entertainment purposes only, and that all opinions expressed herein are solely those of the anonymous author, and she calls her allegedly true tale The Lab Leak Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I've recently become a werewolf against my will as a result of a supposed accident. I don't really believe it was an accident, and I think the plan is to turn as many Americans into werewolves as they can manage to do. Now, some of you laughed at that last statement, admit it. Werewolves don't even exist, right? UFOs didn't officially exist until a few years ago. Same with gay marriage and a lot of other things. Werewolves are just the next thing that they're wheeling out. The thing is, what they will be trying to sell as the old school original werewolfism is actually a new thing entirely made in a lab. Made in the lab I used to work in, to be specific. You can quiz me all day about why they would want to do something like this, but why do they want to release malaria-carrying mosquitoes into Florida? Because they're rich sociopathic oligarchs, and sane, healthy people are just never going to understand what they do. So I guess the answer to any questions starting with why are probably going to have to be answered by reminding you that this planet is run by a bunch of supervillains, and there are no superheroes getting ready to save us. I learned this all firsthand when nobody saved me from becoming what I am now, or my friends from suffering an even worse fate. So I was working as a lab assistant along with another young scientist who I will refer to as Mark. Mark and I both worked in the lab headed up by Mark's father, who we'll call Jerome. Jerome and Mark looked a lot like each other, except Jerome had gray and white hair. Mark and I worked hard, but we were feeling like we were understanding less each day about what the overall goal was for our department. Jerome had become very secretive lately, and seemed to be acting nervous. Mark noticed it before I did. He said his father had never been like that before. So I guess I'll jump into the story on the morning I got to the lab to find that neither Mark nor Jerome were there. Mark eventually showed up, covered in sweat, shaking all over, and claiming that he had been chased to work by a big hairy monster. The way I remember him telling it, a big dog-headed hairy man ran toward him out of the bushes, making some kind of garbled sound halfway between a dog barking and a human shouting. He broke down in the middle of describing this to us, so I know Mark was pretty badly traumatized by this incident. He told us he was running as fast as he could, but he was not able to gain any distance between himself and the monster creature. He tried ducking under a car, but that werewolf or dogman or whatever it was reached his clawed hand under the car after him, and so Mark had to crawl out and keep running. When he came to a big store, he ran inside, and the creature backed away, too frightened to run into the store after him. Then he ran out a back exit of the place and through the woods before heading over to the lab and telling us all about this. So that was a pretty strange start to the morning. But things got stranger when 10, 11, 12 o'clock rolled around, and still no Jerome. We were sent home early, but when we got back the next day, We were introduced to a total stranger who I'll call Kathleen, who we were told was going to be the new head of the lab. We were all stunned that they were replacing Jerome after he had been missing for only 1 day. It felt like they knew something the rest of us didn't about the disappearance. Heck, it was apparent that they knew a whole lot of things that the rest of us didn't. Mark asked for time off, which seemed reasonable to me, and he was denied it. Everything was proceeding in a very strange manner, since none of us even knew what we were actually working on. Being forced to get back to it while our actual leader was missing caused morale to crater. Our lack of motivation was greeted with smug glee by Kathleen, who seemed to have been hired to dive bomb our department into a kamikaze suicide death spiral. Our assignments made less and less sense, and we were constantly having to correct mistakes in the instructions of the tasks given to us to perform. But as bad as things seemed to be getting deliberately in the lab, they became catastrophically worse. The day Kathleen literally blew up the laboratory. I can't even begin to describe to you what it was like to see Mark and 2 other people taken from us in that explosion. I don't think any of the 3 of them saw it coming, and I hope their passing was as quick as it looked. As for me, I had been spattered with something black in that explosion, and I was probably in shock, but my body took over and started running out of the building with the intention of reaching my bike. I was in a panic, and I didn't want to end up like I just saw 3 people I personally knew end up. Fire from a second explosion shot up into the sky, and the building began crumbling around us. We ran out. Scientists, lab assistants, janitors, security guards, everyone ran out of that building, trampling each other over in the process. There was a crowd of running people, and the crowd was gathering new people as it snowballed out of the building and down the hill. I felt it when a 3rd explosion took place behind us, and the sound that hit my ears was so loud, I wasn't able to hear much other than a ringing for the next 5 or 10 minutes. The building had blown up, and bits of it were raining all around us. People were screaming, but I pulled my t-shirt up over my mouth and nose and I ran even harder. I had to get to my bike, and then I could move faster. That was all I could think. Just get to your bike before the crowd tramples you to death from behind. And I did make it to the bike, which I quickly unchained and started hopping onto. I was trying to get a running start, but I found myself feeling strangely uncoordinated. After my 3rd try, I literally fell over on the bike onto the ground like I was named Brandon or something, and I weirdly ended up running alongside the bike instead of getting on it and riding. I was very confused in my state of shock, and I was not understanding yet that I was changing. I was becoming something else, a monster, and it wasn't even because of anything paranormal or supernatural. I looked down at my legs and I screamed. They were covered in an oozing blackness, a sort of living, oily darkness. I saw tendrils of that darkness moving out onto my arms, one little bitty hairy caterpillar of a line after another. It was like hairs creeping all over the surface of my skin, and it wouldn't get off when I tried to rub it off. It suddenly felt as though that black inky oiliness grabbed me in a few places at once, and then quickly and brutally readjusted me from the inside out. I screamed in pain, but it was more surprising and weird than actually painful. I was being reshaped. I was being changed. My legs were different, and the oily, hairy, violent covering gave way to a fur coat covering my body and making it feel itchy just to be wearing clothing. I looked down at myself and I saw that I was becoming something just exactly like what Mark had told me that he'd been chased by. I was becoming some kind of a werewolf. It was mainly changing my head and face first. I began growing fur which matched the curly hair on my head. It didn't grow on my arms though, only on my face, and it took me quite some time before I realized It was growing on my legs as well, in a very profuse manner like on my face, but not blonde down there, more of a very dark brown shade. So it was face first and then the lower half of my body. My arms and torso didn't actually get furry until the very end that first time. Since then, the change happens faster, and I can't really tell you the order of events, since I'm just shivering and sweating all over, as it happens so quickly and so violently. Although I didn't understand it at the time, that stuff that covers you, it becomes part of you. It becomes your werewolf fur, and it becomes your teeth and so forth. But it also puts down roots into your skin and body, which it uses to grab your bones, cartilage, organs, and everything else, and reshape them, or move them around where it needs them to go. Now, I don't really know what this stuff is. I don't know how it works, but I know that at least in some small way, I either helped to create it, or at the least to unleash it. I didn't know what we were working on, but I thought it must be something for the benefit of mankind. I never thought we were inventing or releasing something that would mimic lycanthropy. But nevertheless, this is the reality or a timeline that we've somehow found ourselves in. I became a werewolf and then I couldn't ride my bike anymore. But I could run 3 times faster on my new canine legs than I ever could have biked anyway. It's an exhilarating experience to run that fast, believe me. There are a lot of exciting things about being a werewolf, so in that sense, it is quite different from any other illness or setback that you will ever have to cope with. But you have no control over it. The change happens whenever it wants to happen, and you just sort of have to go with it. Yes, some people become raging man-eating monsters when the transformation happens to them, but I find that when it happens to me, I sort of almost stay myself inside. I mean, I become an animal version of myself. I do hunt when I'm hungry, but I don't hunt humans. I would never consider it. First of all, I do not become a giant werewolf, and trying to take a human down would not be an easy task for someone my size. I don't think I could take a large male human, even with my added strength and speed. Plus, even in my werewolf form, I don't like to get hurt, so I tend not to attack creatures bigger than myself, or even close to being as large as I am. A lot of the stories about werewolves being dangerous, while not exaggerated or false, might not really be all that important. What I mean to say is I don't think werewolves transformed by this illness, or whatever it was we unleashed on the world, are any more dangerous to humans than other humans. If you were prone to being a psycho when you were human, then you are likely to be an even bigger and more dangerous psycho when you're a werewolf. But most people would continue to behave in a decent and moral way, even if all laws were taken off the books tomorrow. So I think that's the way it is with werewolves as well. If you're small, better to protect yourself. If the werewolves start to form into hunting packs, then everything I said might be taken right off the table, but in the short term, I don't see those of us who are now forced to transform as being really any more dangerous than any other person. Anytime you walk down the street, there's a chance you'll be mugged or shot, and I think the chance of a werewolf attack is never going to be more than the risk of any other type of violent crime. So I've been giving you background information, but I didn't personally start to learn any of this myself until the next day or the day after, when I was wandering through the woods, dazed and hungry, and I saw a really, really big dog man or werewolf, a silver-haired one. He gave me the strangest look and started heading in my direction. Of course, I was terrified and I ran away, only to find the beast following me close on my heels. After chasing me for a while, I heard it making a strange sound. I looked back and it seemed to be pleading with me or begging me in some way. I watched as the werewolf walked back into the woods and I followed it at a safe distance, curious where it was going. We eventually reached a cave entrance big enough to walk into without bending over. The beast man indicated a sort of nest of straw to me, and then he went and laid down on the far side of the cave behind some big rocks. Now, I had slept outside the night before, so as long as that guy stayed on his side of the cave, then I felt this would be superior to that. I slept with one eye open that night, but it was better than no sleep at all. In the morning, I was pretty surprised to find that the werewolf who had brought me to the cave was my old boss Jerome, father of my late co-worker Mark. We both filled each other in on what we knew, and I had to break the news to the man about his only son passing in that first explosion. Jerome was racked with guilt, because he had been collaborating with these experiments, and he knew they were unethical and wrong. Now he lost his son because of it, and those of us still alive are some kind of mutant dogman as a result of these sick medical experiments. He also revealed to me that he had in fact been the beast chasing Mark that morning. He was trying to communicate with his son, same as he was with me, but there was no way to know that he was really Jerome. He looked just like a monster. He didn't even look human when he was transformed. But looking at the human form of Jerome that morning, I noticed something very different. His forehead was all scarred from the black virus things that had taken over his nervous system. He was the first to be infected by the oily, hairy tendrils, and they had entered him forcefully through his forehead directly into his brain. Now, according to Jerome, all of this is being done deliberately to kill us off without having to literally do it. The elites would like to have Earth back to keep for themselves alone, and our disagreeable personalities are in the way of their plans. They think we can't disagree with them if we're all turned into animal dogs. They also think we can't create our own new culture if they destroy Disney and Star Wars. This demonstrates that they think we're stupid, and they think way, way, way too highly of themselves. But of course the odds are still stacked against me and Jerome. We're both just kind of helping each other subsist right now. I've sold my home and liquidated my assets, and the two of us are living off that for the time being. Sleeping in a cave and eating birds and squirrels helps us keep our costs down, but still our money supply is finite and shrinking. We have been trying to formulate a plan to do something about this situation, but each time we start to feel like we're making some headway, one or the other of us turns into the beast, and all conversation is halted until the next day. It can feel hopeless, but we are the only two who really know what happened, and so it's gotta be us who do something about it. We'd go to the authorities, but all the authorities are corrupt. We'd be captured and experimented on or just terminated as security risks. We can't take a chance on going to any official channel, as that almost definitely would be the end of both of us. I guess that what mostly keeps me going is hope. I hope that somehow good people will take over these institutions, all currently being run by demons, and that overnight, all of this will fix itself. But right now, things can't get fixed, because it's the people who are breaking everything, who are running the show. And so on that cheery note, I will bid you a fond adieu. I hope you wish us luck, as we will need it. Don't bother writing me back here, I won't be looking for messages, and I only created this account to send this one email to you. I'd like to leave you with this warning. Be careful of the werewolf virus. You do not have to be bit by one of us to get it. I'm not sure how it infects you, and I'm not sure there's any way to stop it. Certainly, while the only two living scientists who even know about it are living in a cave, there is not likely to be anything done to stop the spread. So be careful, people, and above all else, look out for each other. Don't expect anyone else to look after you anymore, ever again. Our executive producer is Joe Makila. She's just great, that's how I feel her. Please join me in thanking Joe Makila for making this episode possible. Joe is a top tier channel member and she gets lots of our perks. If you'd like to learn more, then listen to what this next guy has to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Biggie.
And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button. Or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.